I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The coffee shop on Main had a way of slipping into the background. Steady hum of the espresso machine, the faint clatter of cups, the low murmur of quiet conversations. It was the kind of place where you could spend hours feeling like no one really noticed you. I was there most mornings, a regular invisible enough that the barista barely glanced my way anymore. Today, though, she did. Not the barista, but her. She was sitting by the window, reading something on a tablet, her hair pulled back loosely, a faint crease between her brows. She looked older than I remembered, mid-40s maybe, but the way the light caught her eyes reminded me why I'd never forgotten her. I hesitated near the counter, caught somewhere between ordering and leaving, when she glanced up and smiled. A quick, small thing that felt like an invitation. "Still the same order?" she asked, her voice softer than I expected. I blinked, momentarily off guard. "Yeah, black coffee. No sugar." She nodded, remembering. That detail, something so small, felt like it bridged years. I shuffled to a seat nearby, pulling out my phone but not really looking at it. A message I'd started typing last night was still there, unsent. Just a few words, "Missed you today." I deleted it. Too much, too soon. Across the room, she folded her hand around her cup, eyes flicking to the steam, rising like a slow question. I found my gaze drifting to her hands, the way they moved quietly, deliberately, before I quickly looked away, feeling the familiar weight of being noticed and unworthy at the same time. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "you're not the kid I remember." I smiled a little dryly. "Then get to know me again." She laughed softly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. We both knew this wasn't just about coffee orders or casual catch-ups. The clock ticked on, a slow, steady reminder that this moment was as fragile as the last drop of coffee in my cup. When she stood to leave, she paused, as if deciding something. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded before I could talk myself out of it. As she walked away, her steps light and sure, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I'm not the same either. See you tomorrow." I stared at it for a long moment, folding my napkin with shaky fingers. Maybe this time, things could be different. She showed up the next morning like she said she would, right at the same corner table. The light hit her just right, soft, early sun through the dusty window. I slid in across from her, fumbling with the lid of my coffee like I was trying to steady something inside me. For a moment, we just sat there. No words, just the quiet soundtrack of the coffee shop, footsteps, the hiss of the machine, a low hum of conversations around us. Then she reached in her bag and pulled out a worn paperback, its spine cracked from years of use. "I used to read this when my son was little," she said quietly, tracing the cover with a fingertip. "He loved the stories about lost things being found again." Something in her voice softened, but there was a flicker of something else. Hesitation, maybe? I nodded, sensing the weight behind the memory. "Your son." She looked up, eyes meeting mine for a beat longer than comfortable. "He's grown now. Moved away. It's just me these days." I wanted to say something that could fill the space between us, but the words tangled up in my throat. Instead, I watched her tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a small nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. There was a pause, the kind that stretches thin and almost snaps. "I guess it's weird," she said, voice low. "You're my best friend's kid. I wasn't expecting to see you like this. Not grown up." I laughed, a little uneven. Neither was I. I mean, I always thought of you as this untouchable kind of person. Like older. Different. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, older. Divorced, too. Not exactly the person you'd expect to be hanging around a 20-something. I felt a prick of something, guilt, maybe, or the unspoken rules we both knew but didn't say out loud. For a second, I imagined what it would be like if none of that mattered. If we could just be here, two people sharing coffee and quiet moments. She reached over to help me with a stubborn lid on my thermos, her fingers brushing mine briefly. It was nothing, but it was everything. We shared the same tea, the same silence, the same small space between us that seemed to thicken with unspoken questions. When she stood to leave, she looked back at me with a softness that caught me off guard. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded, and she smiled, a quiet, real smile that lingered longer than expected. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She was there again the next morning, but something was different. Maybe in the way she smiled, or the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I reached for my coffee, the cup cool in my hands. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, but it felt like a small shield, like she was holding something back. "Busy day?" I asked, voice softer than I wanted. She shrugged, fingers twisting the edge of the napkin. "Just things." The pause between us stretched, thick and quiet. I wanted to ask more, but didn't. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it quickly, her expression shifting. I caught the name, "My Friends." I swallowed, the small knot tightening in my chest. The same friend who had always been the bridge between us. The one who'd probably notice if things got complicated. She slid the phone away, but the tension lingered. Outside, footsteps paused by the door, and my friend walked in, laughter ringing out loud enough to break the silence. She glanced up, startled for a split second, then back to me. The moment shifted, the quiet intimacy folding into something fragile. I wanted to reach out to bridge the space, but my hand hovered uncertain, inches from hers. Her breath hitched, our eyes locked, the air thick with everything neither of us dared say. "Almost." Then she pulled back, a faint smile, but distant, like she was already retreating. And I was left with the ache of what nearly happened and the weight of what we still didn't say. We were walking along the riverbank just after work, the sky bruised with the last light of day. The city noise faded behind us, just the soft slap of our steps on the worn path and the occasional call of a bird settling in for the night. She had been quiet for a while, her hands shoved deep in her coat pockets, and I kept stealing glances at her. There was something tight around her eyes, something I hadn't seen before, like a thread pulling taut just beneath the surface. "I saw your friend today," she said suddenly, voice low. "The one who laughs too loud." I nodded, unsure where this was going. She stopped walking, turned to face me. The light caught the lines around her mouth and the way her eyes flickered away, then back. "Does it bother you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her," I said, then shook my head. "No," but she didn't look convinced. "I don't know what this is," she said, eyes searching mine, "or what you want from me. And maybe I'm scared of wanting too much." The confession hung between us, fragile and raw. I wanted to say something that would fix it, something honest, but not too much. Instead, I just watched her, my throat tight. She took a breath, then reached out, brushing a stray hair from my forehead, her fingers lingering a second longer than necessary. "Do you ever think about what happens if we cross that line?" she asked, voice almost breaking. I didn't answer. The pause stretched out, long and quiet, before the last light slipped away. She stopped coming to the coffee shop. At first, I told myself maybe she was just busy, or tired. Maybe the timing wasn't right. But the empty seat by the window felt heavier every morning. The place was quieter without her. I caught myself checking my phone, fingers hovering over her name, texts left unfinished, messages typed and deleted. Then one afternoon, I saw her across the street. She was with someone else, a man, older, with a quiet way about him. I froze. For a moment, I thought about crossing over, saying something, anything, but I didn't. Later, I found out from a mutual friend that she had a son, a detail she never mentioned. A son she was raising mostly on her own. It wasn't just the age gap or the tangled history. It was this whole life I hadn't been part of. I felt like I was suddenly outside a story I thought I was in. Days passed. I stopped showing up at the coffee shop. The habit broke, and with it, the hope. I still thought about her, the quiet way she touched my hand, the unspoken promises in her eyes. But I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The phone screen stayed dark. The chair by the window stayed empty. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. She was washing the last of the dishes, her hands steady but slow, as if each movement was measured. I stood by the doorway, watching her, the words twisting inside me like tangled thread. I wanted to say something, anything, that could change what was hanging between us. But the silence pressed in, thick and heavy. "Are you going to say it?" she finally asked, not looking up. I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I should." She paused, turned to face me. Her eyes held something raw, patient. "Or maybe you don't want to risk losing what we already have." The weight of that settled between us. What we might lose, what we could never go back to. I stepped closer, feeling the space shrink, but the distance still there. "I'm scared," I admitted, voice low. "Scared it's not enough. Or that it's too much." She nodded, a small, understanding movement. "No promises," she said softly. "Just this." She reached out, brushing her fingers against mine. Not a grand gesture, just a touch, steady, real. I held her hand, the tension easing, not erased, but quieter now. "Okay," I said. She smiled. Nothing perfect, just something honest. And for a moment, that was enough. Years later, the coffee shop still felt like a small, steady pulse in the city's slow rhythm. I arrived at 8:47 a.m., just like I always did. Black coffee, no sugar. Her order too, even though she'd never ask anymore. We shared the corner table by the window, the same one where our silence had first found a way to speak. She sipped her tea. I took a slow drink from my cup. No grand words, no promises repeated. Just two people who knew what it took to stay. Sometimes we'd sit quietly, watching the world move around us, the clock ticking, the steam curling in the morning light. It wasn't perfect. There were still pauses, moments that felt unfinished. But they weren't empty anymore. On a day like today, I caught her eyes and saw a softness there, a quiet understanding that only years and shared mornings could build. I smiled, folded my napkin with the same care she always did. And I thought, maybe this is what it means to be seen, not in big moments, but in the small ones no one else notices. That's the story we never needed to say out loud. Just a bench, a time, and a cup of coffee. That was enough.